Good morning and welcome to the Daily Light Devotion. I hope all of you are doing well. Today I am recording for the 11th of March, and today we're going to look at Deuteronomy chapter 14, 15, 16. And in Mark chapter, we'll look at, in the New Testament, we'll look at Mark chapter 13, verses 14 to 37. So we see Moses continue teaching Israel before they enter the promised land in these chapters 14, 15, 16. And how to live as God's chosen people. He explains laws about holiness, generosity towards the poor, and the major festivals they must celebrate. And these instructions were meant to shape Israel into people who reflect God's character, as they were going to be a new nation under God. And in these commands, we also see a deeper picture pointing to Jesus Christ, who perfectly fulfills the law and invites his people into true worship. Deuteronomy 14, Moses reminds Israel that they were the children of the Lord your God. Because they belong to God, they must live differently from the surrounding nations. He instructs his instructions about clean and unclean foods, a reminder of tithe, a portion of their produce, and care for the Levites, foreigners, orphans, and widows. We see Jesus later explain that holiness is not about just external rules, but about the heart. Right? In Gospel of Mark, Jesus teaches that true purity comes from within. Right? As we've been looking at the Gospel of Mark, Jesus also becomes the perfect provision for the poor and needy, and his followers are called to share generously with others. So God's people are called to live differently and care for those in need. Deuteronomy 15, we see every 7 years Israel was commanded to practice the year of release. Right, during that year, debts are forgiven, poor were helped, Hebrew servants could be set free. So God wanted Israel to live with open hands and compassionate hearts. Jesus embodies these principles of release and freedom. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, Jesus announces that he has come to proclaim freedom for the oppressed. Right? And through his death and resurrection, Jesus brings ultimate release, freedom from sin and spiritual death. So God's kingdom is marked by mercy and generosity. Deuteronomy 16, we see the chapter describes three important festivals Israel must celebrate each year: the Passover, Feast of the Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacle. These festivals remind the people to rejoice before the Lord and remember what he had done. So all these festivals ultimately point us to Jesus. Jesus becomes the true Passover lamb, whose sacrifice brings salvation. God's provision is fully revealed through him. Jesus is one who dwells with his people, fulfilling the meaning behind the Feast of Tabernacle. So worship grows when we remember God's saving work, right? And the key takeaways is we need to live as God's people. Our lives should reflect God's holiness, and God's people should care for the poor and needy. And worship grows when we remember what God has done. Moving over to the New Testament, in Mark chapter 13, verses 14 to 37. The theme is the coming king and the call to be watchful. Right? In these passages, Jesus continues teaching his disciples about the future. After predicting his destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, he now describes coming tribulations, false messiahs, and his glorious return. So these messages are both a warning and encouragement. That difficult times will come, but Jesus will return with power and glory. Right? And therefore his disciples must stay alert and faithful. Verses 14 to 23 in Mark chapter 13, Jesus speaks about the abomination of desolation, a shocking event connected to the desecration of the temple. These phrases originally appeared in the book of Daniel. Right? Jesus warns the people will flee quickly when this happens, because the time of great suffering will follow. He warns of false messiahs, false prophets, and signs meant to deceive people. right? Jesus shows that he is the true prophet and protector of his people. He prepares his followers ahead of time so that they will not be deceived. Jesus calls his followers to spiritual discernment and trust his word. Verses 24 to 27, the return of man, right? After the time of tribulation, Jesus describes a dramatic scene. The sun will be darkened, the moon will not give his light, and the stars will fall from heaven. Then people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with greater power and glory. The title, the Son of Man, connects to the vision of the book of Daniel, where a heavenly ruler receives everlasting authority. Right? Jesus promises that he will send angels to gather his people from all over the earth. Right? And here we see Jesus not as the suffering servant, but as a glorious returning king who will bring final salvation to his people. History is moving towards the victorious return of Christ. Everything that we see, even today. Verses 28 to 31, Jesus gives the example of a fig tree. When its branches become tender and the leaves appear, people know the summer is near. In the same way, the signs of Jesus described shows that God's plan is unfolding, right? Then Jesus makes a powerful statement. Heaven and earth will pass, but my words will never pass away, right? And Jesus speaks with his divine authority. His words are eternally and completely trustworthy. So the promise of Christ will never fail. And Jesus explains that verses 32 to 37, that no one knows the exact day or hour for his return, not even the angels. He compares his return to a master who leaves his house and expects his servants to stay watchful. His final command is simple. What I say to you, I say to everyone, watch. So Jesus is the returning Lord who will come again, and his followers must live with readiness, faithfulness, and expectations. The Christian life is lived in watchful hope. So we do not need to be deceived. False voices will appear, but Jesus' words remain true. Christ will return. The Son of Man will come with power and glory. And we need to stay watchful. Believers must live faithfully while waiting for his return. Right? These passages remind us that history is not random. It's moving towards the return of Jesus Christ. While the world may face turmoil, believers live with hope because the same Jesus who came once in humility will return in glory. Until that day, he calls us in clear to stay faithful, stay alert, and keep trusting. So we see in these chapters the returning king and the call to be watchful. So I want to encourage you with that, are we ready? Are we awake? Are we remaining faithful? And keep watching for his return. Have a wonderful Wednesday. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.